All right. Hey, everybody. Bill De La Cruz here, and you're listening to the Origination Point podcast. And I have a really great guest that we're going to have a great conversation about communication and speaking with the heart. And if you've been listening to our podcast, you know that's a big part of what we talk about is how do we create connections. And the origination point is the idea of everything that we are as adult beings has an origination point in our early childhood, in our early growing up, and that it's all connected. And so this idea of speaking from the heart, while it sounds really great, isn't natural for a lot of us. And it's something that even myself I had to learn because it wasn't a part of what I grew up with or what my parents taught me. And so this is just an extension of that conversation. And I have a great guest, Dr. Heather Browne, who is going to tell you a lot about herself and her books and a new book that's just come out. And we're just going to have a free flowing conversation. So, Heather, welcome. It's great to have you here.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. I'm honored to be here, and thank you, listeners. I'm Dr. Heather Browne. I've been a psychotherapist for 27 years. I'm a couple specialist, and my big wheelhouse is helping people learn how to step into communication, how to step into conversation in a way that honors yourself, but also honors others. And so I'm excited to be here.
Well, and isn't conversation a great topic in the world today when we look at how people are so challenged in talking to each other? And
Yes.
and there's so much fear around what should I say? What if I say the wrong thing? How is this person going to respond to me? So I'm just curious about your approach and how you came about to really focus on speaking from the heart.
Background, my mom was a paranoid schizophrenic
Okay.
and she killed herself.
Well,
And so living with someone who was in a different reality showed me that we all have our own and we're never quite sure where the other person might be, though we think we are.
mm,
And so that gave me a different viewpoint of how do you relate to others and what is your story compared to somebody else. And in my childhood, I started to realize that I could connect connection with her by being compassionate and not needing to diminish or lessen or reject her psychosis. I didn't believe it, but I recognized she did. And in that awareness, it showed me, gosh, if you do that with everyone, if you don't reject somebody else's reality, somebody else's belief, not necessarily that you agree with it, not that you're going to go along with it, but they can have theirs. It's a really different way of engaging with the world, and especially with couples. And so what I'll tell them is, you're 100% right for you,
yeah.
and your partner's 100% right for them. And you're maybe, I don't know, 40% right for each other. And that's really the key. How do I walk this with you? With the fact that I think, feel, believe, do things so differently from you. And how do we find ways to do that effectively and not wound each other or damage each other or attack each other, but actually love and respect each other? And was married for 20 years. I'm a widow almost for 10 years. It's
Mm.
crazy to say, but learned a ton from being married. A lot of things that I didn't know to do, a lot of things that I kind of wish I had done. And so I've refined my knowledge base for years upon years upon years. And so that's what I show couples to do. And oh my goodness, probably for 15 years, people have said, "Where's your book?" And so finally it was just time to write it.
Right.
So I'm excited to have it out.
Great. I really appreciate that what you share is rooted in your own experiences because I don't know if you've questioned it, but I've seen a lot of people talk about what to do to grow and to be. And I always wonder, do you actually use this stuff or is it just up here something that you're intellectualizing? And just in hearing your story, it tells me that a lot of what you do is rooted in your own life experience and this whole idea.
That's all I know.
Yeah, and this whole idea of experiencing reality from the extremes that you shared is pretty incredible, number one. And number two, it's like completely in agreement that everyone has their own reality and everyone believes their reality is real and true. But the most important aspect, I think, is, well, of course it's true. And then we argue over who's right. And it creates all of these debates. And so how do you focus yourself and others in conversing in ways that accepts that there's multiple perspectives?
A lot of it comes down to a place of recognizing its opinion. And so I'll say, okay, this is my experience. This is my belief. This is the way I experienced it. And then there's the place of being open to the other. A lot of people will say, "You made me mad,"
Right.
or "You made me angry," and that's not true. You've chosen that reaction or that response. So there's the place of recognizing, "Ooh, wow, something went off inside of me. I'm rejecting how you are right now because I don't like it.
Yeah.
Doesn't go well for me. You're not being my perfect little Heather person." And if I recognize that, oh, there's something inside of me that is like refusing you. What is that?
Yeah.
How do I want you to be different for me? And explore that. So everything is really opinion, belief. It's just a thought. And just because something's a thought doesn't mean it's true. And so if you let yourself have your experiences, your feelings, your thoughts, your beliefs, and know that the other person can as well, then it turns into, gosh, okay, well, I wouldn't look at it that way. But since you do, what do we do with that?
Mhm.
I in no way am trying to offend you. I'm just saying I would do it differently. Help me understand as much as I can, like how you experienced me right now. I did something that was really brilliant in my marriage, but also with my kids, is every month we'd sit down and I'd say, "Tell me in this last month where I have loved you amazingly well. Like, tell me where I've come through for you great. Where have I loved you
Mhm.
best?" And then they'd say something, and then I would, of course, want to keep it. And then I'd say, "And where am I blowing it?"
Yeah.
And I listened. And no matter what they said, I listened because they were important to me and I wanted their experience of me to improve. Did I agree with things that they said? No, but I wasn't asking myself, "Heather, how have you been the best mother or wife to Mac or Sienna?" I was asking, "What is your experience of me?" And to me, that's part of being able to be in relationship. Not that I'm responsible for how you feel, but you're going to be dealing with me in the way that you feel. So if I say, "Well, you're wrong," okay, but now I've caused a split because you're going to keep coming at me from that belief system. If I instead try to understand a little bit your experience of it, then I've got some room to work with you. Well, I don't want you to be fearful of me. What can we do so we can change that?
Yeah.
There's all these opportunities if you open the door up, but we shut them.
Yeah.
"Don't do this. Don't act like this. I hate it when you do this. It's your fault. You don't listen. You don't understand." Instead of, "Well, where could we go with this?"
Yeah. And we're almost all socialized to those other ways of being
Yeah.
in shutting people out or shutting people down. And even when I talk with folks and they say, something triggered me, and I say, well, the trigger is yours. All that
Right.
person was a catalyst. And so you can either choose to own the trigger and explore your own experience, or you can choose to destroy the relationship and attack the other person when all they are is a catalyst for something that you experienced at another time in your life that's not healed yet. And so that's a really interesting piece too about how do people go through a healing process when they have a blind
Well,
spot.
let me give you a little bit of that because there's a place with triggers because everyone talks about them. Let's say I'm triggered. You've said something and it triggers me because it reminds me of something that happened with my
Right.
mom. If I'm willing to recognize that, I can open the door to love myself and to allow you to love me differently than I've been loved in the past. I'm fearful, let's say, that I'm not important to you. And that reminds me, let's say, of my mom. And so you say something that sounds a little discounting in my head.
Right.
And I say, "Ooh, I'm triggered right now." And you say, "Well, like, I'm not trying to trigger you. What's going on?" Well, it reminds me of with my mom where I felt discounted. I don't want to feel discounted with you. I'm not trying to make that happen. I care about you. What could I say to show you it's different with me? A trigger is this incredible opportunity, if you look at it this
Right.
way, to say, I want to be loved differently in this moment and in this experience. And I'm scared because you might not. And if you choose to not and say, I don't care, I'm going to let you feel discounted, okay, then you're not somebody I'm going to move into a healing space with.
Yep.
But if you say, wow, like I don't get that at all. How can we change this? What can we do? It's up to me to heal
Right.
myself. But you can be a beautiful place of safety for me as I do that. Triggers are awesome.
Yeah.
They show you where you've been hurt and where you want to be loved.
Yeah. They really are an indicator of a place of growth. And then you have to decide, how do I want to grow through this? And do I want to keep blaming the catalyst, or do I want to heal myself? And I think we get to make those choices after we become more aware of what a triggering effect actually is. And it's not about the other person, it's about me. And so in this, I know you have a lot of formats for how you set up a conversation. So what are some of the things that you think are important for folks to hear about in terms of, well, how do I even step into a conversation, or how do I become more aware of my triggers if I don't know them? Because we all have blind spots also. And so it's not like everybody can step into a conversation and go, okay, here's where I might be triggered. Let me be aware of
Mhm.
that. If I do get triggered, I'm going to process through it this way. And so those are some of the things I do, because I work with a lot of large groups of people. And I know that within any group, there's people who want to be there, people who have to be there, and people all over the spectrum. And so I get less and less triggered because I have been in a healing process for a long time. And yet, when I do get triggered, I know how to process through it. And I think the other piece is, how did you experience me is a much different conversation than what's wrong with you, or what did I do wrong.
Yeah.
And
And everyone's going to experience you a little bit differently.
mhm,
And you're going to be experienced differently depending upon what's going on in a conversation. You might think I'm loving and kind, and 5 minutes later, you might not think that at
right.
all. So it's important to realize we're not a constant. We're changing all the time. We're moving into how we're communicating together,
Hmm.
how we're connecting
Hmm.
or not connecting together. But you brought up a great question. How do you know to step into a conversation? And why are you even stepping
Right.
into a conversation? To me, that's the first question to ask. Why are you thinking of having this conversation? What is it you want out of it? If we were to just ask ourselves that, we wouldn't have a lot of the conversations we have, because most of us just kind of blab things out of our mouth. I hate it when you do that. Why do you always do that? You're such an idiot. If I'm wanting you to love me and respect me, that's not the best way to start. What
Mm.
I tell people is, if you think of communication like a recipe, if I want to make meatloaf, I know what I need to put in. I know how long it takes to make it.
Mhm.
I've got to have the time and the ability to do that. And depending upon how good I am at cooking, it's going to be meatloaf. If I was to do the same thing with a conversation, where do we want to be at the end?
Yeah.
And what are the things that we need to make certain we lay in to get to that savory place at the end? Then it's a different conversation. And where I start is telling the person they're important. You're really important to me. And I want this to go well. And I'm hoping it does. And this is what my goal is for where we're going. What's yours? And then you lay in, the things that you need. And then I always say, if at some point you become uncomfortable with what I say or you don't understand, would you let me know?
Yep.
Because I'm going to want to stay there until we clarify what's going on and then move on. And I'm pretty attuned. So when I'm speaking with someone, if I feel something, I'll say, "Oh, I lost you for a second there, didn't I? Would you share with me what happened?"
Hmm.
And half the time, the person doesn't even realize that they've gestured or they've pulled back or their energy has moved. And they're like, "Yeah, how'd you know?" And what I say is, because you're more important to me and our relationship is more important to me than this topic. So I'm checking to see how engaged we are.
Right.
And then I do the same for myself. If I start to feel flooded or angry, I'm going to say, "Give me a second." And I'm good at this. So I'll close my eyes, take a moment, breathe, and say, "Okay, you're upset right now. You're triggered. What's going on? You're feeling disrespected. Do you think that Bill is really trying to disrespect you? Probably not. Okay, so what do you need to say? Hey, Bill, I just want to let you know, like, this is an area that's sensitive for me.
Right.
S Be gentle with me here. I need to walk through this a little slower. I need to make certain I feel safe with you a little bit more than I do right now, and this is just my stuff." Most people would be like, "Oh my gosh, thank you for sharing that with me." Not, "What's wrong with you? Why are you triggered?" There's a place of recognizing you can have a beautiful conversation with someone as long as you choose to have a beautiful conversation with
Right.
someone and to support them along the way like you support yourself. It's a choice. I say communication is a love letter if you choose it to be that
Right.
way
So you have
or
to
not.
you have to choose not to see that person as the other, because a lot of times
Yeah.
people step into a conversation and right away, well, we're different. And I'm like, well, how do you know you're different if you've never talked to this person? And so we other people almost unconsciously in some ways and consciously in other ways based on the labels. And the other piece that you shared, I think, is important for all of our listeners to realize that we are all just energetic human beings. And the more that you can touch in and move past the labels and be connected in an energetic way, the more able you are to do what you shared, Heather, about being able to sense when something is awry, or to ask a question, or is everything okay? Is there something else we need to talk about? Or how are you feeling right now? Versus just barreling through the conversation without that um, understanding that something just shifted here in our energy, and I notice it, and I don't want to label it, so I don't want to say, why are you upset now, or why are you mad? And and what I tell people, a lot of what I do is, all I'm doing is working with the energy that we have or that's in the room, and there are ways to shift energy. So I'm curious what you think about that, because it sounds like that's a
Oh,
lot of what you do.
absolutely. Absolutely. And when I feel resistance, I'll say, "Oh, I'm feeling something. Is there something I can do to make this feel a little safer?" I'll ask people, "Do you want to stay right here? I'm, I'm feeling a little hesitation. Do we want to stay right here? We can stay here as long as you want." And a lot of times that's all someone needs to hear. "Oh, you care about my experience?" Absolutely. But I've got the knowledge that if you're experiencing me well and this conversation well, it's going to go better for me. If you're experiencing me as being harsh or critical or judgmental or not getting you, it's not going well.
Hmm.
And so I take ownership and responsibility of my part. I also don't believe it's up to somebody else to understand me. I don't think anybody can really know if we understand one another or not. I'll say, that the wall behind you is a little bit soft white. I don't know if you see the same color that I see. I'll never know. And so if I don't believe that you can ever really crawl into my head, can't really crawl into my heart completely, I'll never know. the more I can try to do is come alongside with commonality. And I'll say, from your experience, or help me see it through your eyes, or could you share with me how you heard that? How did that impact you? How can we change that? If it doesn't bless you, if it doesn't bless the other, if it doesn't bless the conversation or the relationship, you're not doing it in the best way. And so when I start to get to resistance, when I start to get to fear, when I start to get to anger, like I'll slow it down and I'll say, let's be mindful here.
Yeah.
Let's take a deep breath.
Well,
And then I'll ask, is there something I can do? Sometimes it's, can you pray? Sometimes it's, can you hold my leg? Sometimes it's, can you tell me that you love me? Sometimes it's, can we just sit quietly?
yeah,
If you realize that communication is about agreement, I wish people realize this. Communication is about agreement. That's going to be the best conversation. So, any place I don't have agreement, we got a little to figure out. People say it's to believe what I believe. I don't agree. It's that we can agree from our own perspective and figure out how to walk this dance together. But if you're pulling back, if you're fighting me, if you think I'm judging you, I've lost you.
yeah,
And so I'm going to want to come back and reshape that. How can I do this differently for you? This isn't the experience I wanted. I'll say to people, I think I can do this better. I don't think I'm honoring you well enough right now. I don't think you're feeling loved or heard by me. If you think about what happens in a disagreement or an anger, you're not listening to me.
yeah,
You don't get it. We're telling the person our problem. And then the other person says, well, you're not listening to me and you don't get it. Da, 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 da. Instead of saying, you know what? Let me just listen. Let me just listen. There was one time my husband was giving me suggestions about something and it was completely wrong and I would 100% not do it. And I thought, zip your mouth, zip your mouth. And I listened to his whole little way he would have done it. At the end, I said, this was so helpful. So helpful. Thank you so much for that. Not that I was going to use it in that situation, but I realized how my husband thought so differently than I did. And then I did use that because it was more information.
mhm,
Wherever there's a fight, wherever there's a challenge, there's information that you're missing.
right,
And it's a beautiful gift to find out. You don't feel I'm with you. You don't feel I get you. I want to try. Where can we come together? What do we agree upon? A lot of people will say we've got to resolve an issue and they go big. Like we need to get the blue Prius that costs $10,000 or $20,000. And they go to an absolute. I show them how to start further back. We need to get a car. Yes. How much money do we have to spend? $20,000. Okay, we're going to get a car, cost 20,000, and you keep stepping in and stepping in and stepping in and stepping in. The more you can find places where you align, the easier it is to deal with those places where you don't. And I'll say, we're getting a car, it's $20,000. We want a Prius, it might end up being teal green instead of blue.
right.
But you keep, I agree to this, I agree to this, I agree to this, I agree to this, I agree to this. Keep trying to move toward yes instead of bashing that you don't get exactly what you want.
Yeah. Well, and it's really interesting. And I look at the dichotomy between agreement and acceptance, and I think that in a lot of cases, it's challenging for people to agree and less to accept. Although acceptance can be challenging too, because when when you look at acceptance as giving in or folding your belief system, then it can be more challenging. And so this idea, and I have had this conversation with a group today around, do we need to agree to move forward and work together, or do we need to create a culture of acceptance that we all have different perspectives, we all have different truths, different realities, and yet we're all here on behalf of this organization to do this work together. So can we accept that we're all different, unique people, and yet we're all here for the same outcome? And so I'm curious your experience around that whole dance between agreements, agreeing and accepting, because I think we live in a world right now that is so divided, and we're being socialized to believe that there is more that divides than connects us, and I think just the opposite. And one of those divisions is people think that if we don't agree, then we have nothing in common. And so I'm curious about how you see the role of acceptance through this whole
I
process of
I
communicating.
I honor what you say. You show it beautifully. You show it beautifully. So let me give you an
Okay.
example. My mom was a paranoid schizophrenic. She thought helicopters flying over the house were coming to get her. I accepted the fact that she thought that helicopters flying over the house were coming to get her. Did I agree? No. But I recognized she believed that. So I didn't need to tell her she was wrong because she wasn't for her.
Right.
She was for me. Acceptance and agreement are very different. Acceptance is this is your truth. Agreement is I agree with your truth. Now, sometimes it'll be both.
Right.
Those are lovely moments. But a lot of times, especially in, corporate America or a big group of people, it's not. And so, yes, we agree we need to figure out this challenge. But I don't know if we're all going to get to the same place that we would all do it exactly the same.
Mm-hmm.
So they can come together, but I think a lot of times they don't. Agreement is like the bliss moment. It's
Sure.
all
If
lined
we
up.
if
We're
we
all
can get to that, it is really a wonderful place, and yet it's a
yeah,
rarity.
it can be, but I think the more we really allow ourselves to explore accepting,
Yeah.
the less problematic it is. Because what you'll find is when you really stay in acceptance, sometimes it's okay to not agree.
Mm-hmm.
The helicopters flying over the house and me knowing my mom was scared to death, I helped her through that.
Right.
I accepted her reality, and then it wasn't a problem anymore because we weren't in a place of negation. If you can be in a place of acceptance, you have erased negation. This is key. Okay, something's coming through that's important. If you come to a place of acceptance, you erase the belief of negation. And then it turns into some fine tuning of, okay, well, where can we get to the most commonality here? We're
Mm-hmm.
going to resolve this issue, but how do we get to the most commonality? And so instead of doing what the world does, which is says it's black or it's white, there's nothing in
Right.
between. You say, whoa, 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 there's a whole bunch of shades. We're going to figure this out somewhere on the spectrum. How close can we get? And then there's acceptance in the agreement. Like, this is as far as we can go. Yeah, this is about as far as we can go. Awesome. Look how much further we are.
Mm-hmm.
But it's choosing to not buy into the belief that we can't live together well and that I can't care about you and care about me.
Yeah.
I don't agree with that at all.
Yeah. And I think you really struck a chord. It is about choice. So I was having a conversation this morning with a group about expectations. We were talking about, so how do expectations impact? Because if you have an expectation of me and you don't tell me, and I don't meet your expectation, and then you get upset, whose issue is it, yours or mine? And so I just asked them to think about, is it fair to have expectations? In my own life, I grew up in an abusive home, and my expectation of being cared for and loved were never met. And so my personal perspective on expectations is they're a setup for disappointment, because nobody will ever meet my expectations, and some days I don't even meet my own. And I also found that if I live in expectation, I'm always living in the future versus being present, because I'm always out here
Yeah.
looking at, well, is this person going to meet it? And so I'm not really even present with them. So I found
Which
that if,
then lessens what it could be sometimes too.
say that again.
Like, it can lessen what it can
Yeah.
be. If I'm saying, "Oh, it's got to be like
Right.
this. Then every place it doesn't feel that way, like I'm not happy, I'm not comfortable, it's not going the way I want. And so I continually pull myself
Yeah. It
back
goes,
because I've already decided what it is to be. Whereas if I go and open and say, oh, wow, I didn't think it was going to be like this at all. Isn't this amazing? I may end up finding that it's even better than I could have ever in my head imagined.
yeah.
And then to me, that's when situations and relationships are magic. Like, wow, you brought something to this that I wouldn't even have thought of. That's when you're really co-creating in the most beautiful way.
Hmm.
I realized one day that perfectionism is a limitation. And I went, "Wait a second, what?" But I went, "Wait a second. If you say this is perfect, now it's a limit because it can be beyond."
Yeah.
And so when you realize that, you stop playing that little game with
Yeah.
yourself and start to say like, "No, I do want more." No thought has come out of my mouth before this moment that was this moment. And so I'm creating whatever new thought, reality, belief I have in this moment right now. It'll never quite be the same. When you realize that, then there's just unlimited possibilities. And to me, that's where life and relationship and love becomes really exciting.
Yeah. And
Why could we not do this totally differently?
it takes you out of that negation place into accepting.
Yeah.
It allows you
Yes.
to be more present, not only with that other person, also with yourself. And and to your point, it allows you to see something that you wouldn't have seen if you'd have been stuck in your head with this expectation or this idea, even though we have to agree, because then you just keep fighting for what you think is right, and they will do the same thing. And so I think this heart connection is so important, and I think that's a big part of it. So speaking of the heart, I know you have a new book, so let's talk a little bit about that. I see it right behind you there. I can see the heart. So
With my book, Speaking with the Heart. So it basically is being a therapist for 27 years. I have seen some things that I don't think we were taught how to do. I don't think we were taught what are some important questions to ask before you step into a conversation. What do you do if things start to go south? How do you deal with the fact that you have very different belief systems? And so, because I work so much with couples, that became my wheelhouse. And so I just kept coming up with new exercises and new awarenesses of, oh, we can do this better. We can do this differently. We can learn from this. Let's grow. And there's a lot of commonality in the way I see people do something. So I thought, well, let me start from what is communication and how do we look at it and what can we do with that and how do we honor where we've come from our childhood because it's very much us and our attachment styles and our love languages and if we have been abused or in abandoned in these areas that create a lot of challenges for us and how do you just keep moving toward a better and better and better relationship. So it covers the gamut: sex, money, anxiety, fear, rejection, holidays, anger, compassion, conscious relationship. It covers all of it. And I'm really excited about how people have already said it's changed their marriage, it's saving their marriages, or it's giving them a very different reality of themselves. And they're taking self responsibility of how they communicate with themselves and with others. And that's beautiful. So I'm really excited about where it is and where it's going and how it's blessing people.
so can you share something in your book that you talk about that you think is really of value?
Yeah. I mean, to me, the four most important questions before you step into a conversation
Yeah.
is vital. We talked about the first one, which is what is the outcome that you're wanting to have?
Hmm.
Why are you having this conversation?
Hmm.
And then a second one that I ask is, are you sure that this is going to bless your relationship, the person you're speaking with, and yourself? Because if it's not, then you're probably just complaining,
Right.
arguing, fighting. You can do it differently because the heart's not involved. It's not gonna bless the other in some way or the conversation or relationship. There's a different way to do it. So I say, let's figure it out. Let's figure out how we can come where this is going to help grow, help change, help nudge. And then the third is, are you open to the other person's beliefs and systems
Mm.
in this? And if you're not ready to have that conversation because no one wants a lecture. And then the fourth is, and people don't think about it, but it's vital. Is this the best time? So much about our conversations would be different if we're respectful of the other person's time. And one thing to be aware of is I might have been thinking about this for a month
Right.
and I finally come to you. You might not even know that I've been thinking about it. So I'm coming in a month in and you're like sideswiped. So I like to share, we need to talk about the car. When is a good time for you? I, whether someone's religious or not, I think Jesus is the perfect example. He in his belief, he was the son of God and he was coming to the door to share the message. So he'd come to the door and he'd knock. He'd say, "Hey, I'm the son of God. You want to let me in?" And people would either say yes or no. And if they said no, he didn't bash it down. He didn't scream and yell. He
Mm.
didn't rip them apart. He said, "Okay, I'll come back again." And then he waited for someone to say, "Yeah, Jesus, come on in." And then he sat down and talked. If you look at that framework, it's perfect. I know what I have to share. I want to share it with you. I come to you and say, "Can we share?"
Yep.
I respect your response and I wait to be invited. Now, this is key. If you wait until the other person comes to you and say, "No, this is a bad time, but tonight at 6 is good, and we can talk about the car," then you come to me at 6 and you say, "Okay, I'm ready." You've already stepped in. We're already moving toward agreement because I've waited to make certain that you're in a place to step in. We're already like partially down the path. If I do it the way most of us do it, we need to talk about the car. Nope, we need to talk about it right now. We got to figure this out.
Right.
Put your phone down.
Right.
You're not in agreement with me at
Right.
all. And because personally, I want this conversation to go in a way that benefits me also, there's a place of how do I set that up in the best way? And when we come to the places where it doesn't agree for you, how do I work with you in that place to see if we can come closer and closer to
Yeah.
acceptance?
So interesting.
Yeah.
I think it just clicked with me about when you say agreement in the conversation. A lot of that is rooted in kind of the how that we do it, the process that we do it. And so are we agreeing that the timing is right? Are we agreeing that the topic is correct? And so I think that's a good distinction for our listeners to understand that agreement, you can create agreement around a process for the communication and still not agree in terms of perspective and outcome and still stay in acceptance
Absolutely.
and still stay in relationship. So, so I
Yeah. And you
think,
might need to say, like, "I'm overwhelmed. We got to stop. Like,
yeah,
this is too much for me.
yeah,
I can't do anymore." Then we're in agreement that we need to stop.
yeah,
Not, "Well, I'm not done. So let's push ahead." Well,
right,
I'm losing you.
right,
I need to not lose you.
yeah,
So if we need to take a pause, okay, when are we coming back to this? Because we're not done yet. Then we're in agreement and acceptance that we need to do this differently.
yeah. I could even
Yeah.
ask you as part of that agreement of the process, tell me how you take in information. Can you make decisions right away or do you like to process?
Beautiful.
Because
Beautiful.
I know a lot of people are
Beautiful.
processors and when I work with groups, I ask the person, well, were you really in disagreement or did you just feel pushed? And they would say, I'm a
Mm.
processor. I can't answer a question like that. I need like some time. And they just kept pushing me. And I didn't feel comfortable telling them that I needed more time because I knew they needed an answer. So we get into this crazy back and forth where we don't ask for what we want in a conversation and then we just allow it to go crazy. So I think it's an important
When you
distinction
look
around
at
the
that,
agreement of how we're going to talk to each other is different than agreeing on all the concepts that we're sharing.
yeah,
Um,
and if that were, let's say, my situation and I'm a processor, and let's say you're not,
right,
you're a decider, if you come to me and you say, "Heather, we gotta figure this out within 5
right,
minutes." It would be really important for me to say, "This is gonna be a problem for me because 'cause I'm a processor."
yes,
And if you say, "It needs to be resolved," then I'm gonna say, "Okay, I don't know if I'll come to a place where I'm solid, but I can share big yeses and nos.
Yeah.
And I might not be at the place where it's decided, but if it has to be decided in 5 minutes, which most things don't, then at least we're working together on that, and I might not get to a complete yes with you in 5
Yep.
minutes. I might get to, like, that's not too bad, like, that's doable.
And I'll go think about it.
Yeah,
And I'll come back
and
and let you
sometimes that
know.
just needs to debate,
Right.
sometimes not.
Yeah.
There's also a place to find out if the person's a debater. This doesn't happen very often, but I have for sure had this happen in my sessions where I'm like, "Can I ask you a question?" And they'll say, "Yeah." I'm like, "Do you love to debate?"
Right.
And I'm almost always right, and they're like, "Yeah." And I'm like, "Why do you say that?" Like, "'Cause you're coming up with challenges that there really doesn't need to be that challenge unless you like to debate."
Yeah.
So, letting the partner know that, they like to debate. This
Cool.
isn't gonna be a discussion, this is a debate.
Right.
So, you gotta find out if you're willing to do that or
Yeah.
not. Different energy.
Awesome. Well, this has been a really great conversation. I'm so happy that we were able to connect. So, how do people find you? How do people find your book? And what are any last words that you'd love to share with our audience?
It's been fascinating for me too, and you brought me some new insights, so thank
You're
you for that,
welcome.
Bill. I always love that when that comes. Probably my website's the easiest, it's kind of the hub of Heather, www.drheatherbrowne.com. You can find my book there, my TEDx, how to work with me, my freebies, my workshops, my programs, all of that. But if you're wanting my book, Speaking with the Heart, you also can go to Barnes& and Noble and Amazon. It's online, and just put in Speaking with the Heart, Dr. Heather or Dr. Browne or Dr. Heather Browne's books, and it'll come up.
Cool.
Certainly, if there's any questions that listeners have, please reach out. I'm always fascinated to hear what has clicked for someone or a place where something might need a little refining to make it a little clearer. So
That's
don't hesitate to reach out.
great. So, you've been listening to The Origination Point, and we've had a great conversation with Dr. Heather Browne, who has a new book called Speaking from the Heart or Speaking with the Heart.
Speaking with the
Speaking
Heart.
with the Heart. So check it out. It sounds like a really great read. And I just want to thank you, Heather, for being my guest today. Really appreciate it. And any feedback that I get through my social media stuff, I'll be sure and share that with you as well. So,
I really appreciate
yes,
that because I learned so much from how I am
great.
received. Thank you. It's an honor to be here. I've wanted to do this for a little while, so I'm so grateful that you opened up the space for me. You
Awesome.
you have so many gifts to offer, and you're really enjoyable to speak
Thank
with.
you. Maybe we'll do it again. So, all
Sounds good.
right. Take care. Bye bye.
You too. Bye.